Hi, Patrick.
Hello. There is my mute button.
Found it.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Marcin.
Hey, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Great.
Is it a different microphone than usual?
Probably. Let me take a look into settings. It's supposed to be the same.
Okay.
Let's wait 3 minutes more and we can start.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my audio is a little messed up. Hi, everyone. Happy Monday.
You have power or something?
I have power. I didn't have power all weekend.
Oh,
It was an adventure, to say the least.
where Where in Colorado did this happen?
So it was most of the Front Range, but it really depends where you lived because I spent a lot of time outside because there was nothing else to do. And I would go for like a run or a walk or a bike ride, and I'd see like a corner somewhere that had power, and I'd be like, like what's special about you? So it was kind of random. And it was funny because they're like, oh yes, we have crews out there like, you know, taking care of things. And I would have thought a lot. I didn't see one truck or anything. I was like, where are they? I feel like anyway, it was lots of people were very angry because I think they literally gave like 2 hours notice. I didn't even know. I was just working and just everything went off. And then I was like, oh no. And then I looked at the weather and the wind speeds were like supposed to reach like 100 that night. And yeah, it was a whole shenanigans.
Funny, yes,
I
because
know.
we lived in Colorado for a year, 2018-19, in Fort Collins. So it's somewhere in the vicinity.
Yeah, so Fort Collins is like toward the north.
Yep.
I don't know if they lost power or not. It was an intentional shutdown because have you heard of the Marshall Fire? So there was a big fire a couple of years ago. It was on December 30th.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
And lots of people lost their homes, like entire neighborhoods were burnt down. It was absolutely devastating. And it was because of, you know, high winds combined with, it was literally the perfect storm. It was high winds combined with the dryness, combined with some electric issues with power lines. And so everyone at the time was like, why didn't you shut down the power? So instead of actually fixing the infrastructure, the new standard is they just take off all the power for like, you know, 150 to 250,000 people, which is what you get when you don't have municipal power. But anyway,
Well, today you will even lose.
What?
Sorry, today you will even lose the sun for a bit.
Oh, it's going to be pretty sunny this week, so I doubt we'll lose the sun. What was really funny was that Sunday the power's off most of the day. It didn't come on till very late, but it was a beautiful day. It was kind of quiet out. Like most of the winds were gone by the early morning. They just had to go around, I suppose, and turn it back on and inspect things and whatever they were doing. Hopefully they had more than one person doing that. Christian,
Okay, guys.
long time no see.
Hello. Yeah, sorry,
Hello.
I've been absent. It's
okay, we forgive you.
It's very kind.
Yeah, so it's 7:07. Let's start, I think. I put the first item into agenda, which is review of new proposals F and H. And there was also proposal G, but I decided to close it because it didn't make sense after all. I mean, I wanted to create some kind of artifact and the specification that would be based on the media type. It would mean that communities would have to come up with their own media types and the structure would come out of that. But as Brandon correctly pointed in there, it should be the other way around. People should come up to OCI and define something in here instead of we trying to reach them and build some kind of specification that way. And in general speaking, that would be a very distributed specification if we do it this way. So I think those points are valid. That's why I closed the proposals, and I think we could focus mostly on F and H. So maybe Vanessa, you can quickly say a few words about your proposal to those who didn't have time to read that.
To do that, I have to actually like open my proposal and remember what the heck I wrote. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so this proposal was a sort of slimmed down, simpler version of D. This was after watching discussion at KubeCon, just about kind of the desires and needs. And I think the general sentiment was that probably what I had in D was a little bit too much. And I kind of stepped back and realized that I would be relatively happy with, or actually more specifically, the HPC community would be relatively okay with just having an external artifact with something simple to find. And we don't need like a schema URL, for example. We can just use a metadata attribute if we really need it for that. So the basic idea of F is exactly that. It's based on just having an artifact. And then in the artifact, so this is a point for discussion, because as Marcin just said, it may not be the greatest idea, but in the context that each artifact is sort of scoped to a particular media type that's owned by a compatibility group, that means that we would sort of remove that level of information from the artifact itself. So if you remember from proposal D, it would be like, org open containers, or sort of open or supercontainers.org, org.supercontainers. And then it would have the super containers, and it would be like io.archspec, it would have archspec. That's removed given this design. And so it's generally just a JSON file with compatibilities, and then groups like CPU, kernel, memory, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if we think that's a bad idea, if we think, never mind, it's not a good idea for each of these groups to maintain the media types, we want to represent that in the artifact, then we basically just do a switch. We have the artifact type B for compatibility, and then within the artifact, instead of the group sections being like CPU, kernel, we have the different groups for we have the different compatibility groups. And that actually makes it almost identical to proposal D minus the schema. So does anyone have any questions? Just ask. You don't have to like raise your hand or anything.
Well, so far I don't have any questions, but maybe others.
And how do we make sure that like people use the same keys?
So that would be namespaced by, so in the design where it's with the compatibility group is the media type, the stuff inside would be namespaced. The actual structure of the compatibilities would be namespaced and structured by that compatibility group. In the case where it's like proposal D and the groups are inside, it would be just like before, where the compatibility group still maintains those labels. And of course, people could put additional junk in there, but kind of the expectation is that if I'm a compatibility interest group and I maintain these labels, and I also have tools that support parsing those labels, if you throw some extra junk in there, I'm just going to ignore it.
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
feel free, but I'm not going to do anything with it. So that should answer your question.
Yeah, cool.
My personal opinion on that, it's okay as long we have a one centralized way of describing all of these communities that define their own compatibilities, that users are not kind of lost in here. So for example, if we have telco, HPC or something like that, we have one OCI page where we have a reference to all of these labels. I think Brandon wouldn't agree with me in here, but I think that from my point of view, it would be fine. So for proposal H is similar to F in the sense that there is also an artifact, and it has a little bit different structure than Vanessa's proposal, but basically it's very similar. Yeah. So I think we are in the point that based on proposal A and E, also F and H, we are going to come up with the final design. And there is one more discussion ongoing right now. It's about the labels, because we know we have a need to provide community labels like HPC centric or telco centric, but there is a question about the generic labels. I wrote in proposal E some comments about that, and I would like to explore these possibilities, if we are going to provide generic OCI labels for the artifact itself or not. And this is what I would like to discuss a little bit, what people think. Because we have some centric labels, right? But between the groups, we will probably come up with duplication of labels. This is what I can imagine. If we, for example, don't define kernel labels or system labels, I think those would appear in both HPC organization and telco organization. So this brings a question: should we create OCI labels that are generic enough to cover generic use cases? I think yes, but the question is how we do it and how we later bring communities labels into that.
Wait, just so I understand, there's actually two places for labels, because we're going to be passing something that sort of goes into a main manifest, like some kind of platform features, and then we're going to have the community artifacts. Is that correct?
Yes, so for the platform labels, as Brandon stated, in his proposal, he's only thinking about the CPU features. He doesn't think to bring there any kernel, any system labels or other stuff like that. So only some specific CPU features like AVX or something like that.
Yeah, so I guess, so let's step back first. If we choose a design, so I guess there's two designs now. There's one where the compatibility interest group is like the media type, and then there's one where it's inside. And that doesn't make a huge difference, but it might make a difference depending on if having it on the outside of it, having it in either place will influence whether the label needs to be prefixed by the compatibility group. Does that make sense? I guess even if it did that, you could still parse away the compatibility group, but that still might be problematic. So you're saying within a compatibility spec across different compatibility interest groups, we would want to provide some guidance for standardization of labels. So if you have two different specs, two different artifacts from two different compatibility groups, even though they're different, they might have things that can be compared. Is that correct?
Exactly, they can have a common shared part. And I'm thinking about extracting this common shared part and put it under OCI. So I'm thinking about specific labels here, like maybe kernel version, kernel modules, PCI, USB, or maybe some CPU stuff, things like that.
Yeah, I guess my question is, if we have those standard labels, why don't we have the OCI essentially maintain sort of a core compatibility interest group that has them? Like arguably, wouldn't that reduce redundancy? And then we would encourage folks to use those to the largest extent possible. And then if someone comes up with a label that they think is overlapping for a lot of communities, they would open a, an issue or a PR there. And we would strongly advocate that only labels that are very like different or interest group related niche should go into the actual compatibility interest group. So then we would have it would be more likely that people would be using the same set of labels as opposed to making their own labels, but then double checking with a list that we have to see if it like crosses. There's it's sort of almost the same thing, but there's the subtle difference in that like one, you could see a compatibility interest group mostly using like the OCI maintain labels and then just adding on the tiny little set that they have as special.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I'm thinking about, that maybe we have this OCI-centric organization and we just pick and graduate labels that are common across different organizations. So that would sound okay to me. Yeah, exactly like you described. Joe is suggesting to create a new proposal for labels only. I'm not sure if we want to do it, or there's so many proposals already. So yeah, I'm open to suggestions in that. But
maybe I feel like right now the proposals are like the level of the structure of the artifact, and like I feel like we should decide on knowing that we're going to do labels. I feel like we should finalize this first step and then work on the labels portion as opposed to putting in another proposal that's on the same level as these proposals, because it's a different thing.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's talk about that, unless anybody has any comment to that.
And those labels are like in the proposal H, you have like OCI CPU, OCI kernel, that would be the namespace for the generic ones, and then others can have their own, right? And if it's like flat or not flat, I mean, that's, of course, it's a decision to make, but not the most important one, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, right now, because we will come up with what kind of labels we want to define in there. Now we have to talk about the structure of the artifact itself. So if you, I'm gonna send a link to proposal H that we can compare.
And if, like for tools that are going to use those labels, is it expected that most of the OCI generic ones they will use and the others are plugins that you can throw in to recognize and handle supercomputing.org or supercontainers.org labels and such? Or is it up to a new tool to use it?
It's up to the tool itself, because we decided, at least for now, I'm not sure if it's gonna change, that we don't maintain a tool under OCI for that because it's opinionated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think
What I-
Christian, you have a good point though, that if we do have a set of standard OCI maintained labels for people that want to develop tools, that makes it easier for them to choose that central set as like the source of truth, as opposed to having to look at this entire landscape of different maintained groups and being like, which ones are important, which ones are used. And it could be that we eventually do work, I don't know, some kind of like metadata scraping practice to see which interest groups labels are actually being represented in like the container ecosystem. But for the most part, I think probably what we'll tend to see is that you'll have a huge bulk of people using like the core ones that we maintain. And then like HPC over here, like the niche communities will have like a bunch of SPAC builds, right? That have like a bunch for MPI. But then someone building a tool can choose kind of how they want to operate.
Yeah. No, makes sense. I mean, one of the generic labels, and I'm not going to go down into discussing labels, but could be like the machine type and vendor name, like HPE, whatever is the fanciest, like DL380, and you know exactly, like, this is a generic label that just describes for everyone what the actual system is. I think that kind of label would help also the HPC community to decide, right? If you have a very specific model name, you can derive a lot from that. But yeah, anyhow, no, won't go into it. Cool, sounds great.
Yeah, that's okay. So, but before we move forward, I just wanted to. We had Steven and he left. I'm too late. Doesn't matter. Okay, so let's discuss about the structure of the artifacts itself, because we have two proposals right now, F and H, and basically I like the domain way of building the artifact itself. So with this, what we agreed, Vanessa, do you think we can keep it, or do you still want to group to CPU, stuff, kernel, and other groups? If my question is
Honestly,
not
like
clear,
I am
yeah.
happy with either way. I'm happy that there's just an artifact period, and I guess like I'm kind of indifferent about that, and I would defer to what the group likes better.
So basically, because Vanessa was creating this idea in the proposal idea about using domain structure for the attributes, I would follow this way, to be honest, because it's quite simple. And probably we need a list of compatibilities as Joe proposed in his proposal. So maybe we can combine both of them. The discussion is, yeah, sorry, I interrupted by myself. It's late for me. I'm in Philippines. It's 1 a.m. So sorry for that. So yeah, what do you think, guys? I think I'm voting basically for having domain structure and list of compatibilities initially to have a simple artifact combining the previous D, which is F, and now with H.
That was
Yeah.
confusing to me. Sorry.
Sorry.
So
my
what's
bad.
the proposal? Is the dotted keys like in H?
Yes, like in H, you would have the structure like in H, that you have a list of compatibilities and you keep domain attributes like OCI.CPU.vendor or whatever like that. But you have a list of compatibilities.
Right. But they basically have a compatibility score, if I understood it correctly, and then a list of key values. And basically the
Yeah.
one that matches all the key values
So
determines the compatibility score, and then the highest one or the
I
lowest
would
one is
I would
picked.
stop you here. Sorry, I will stop you
Okay.
here. I'm just talking about the structure itself right now. I'm not talking about the
Okay.
specific fields. So that would be the list as it's in the H, which is evolution of all proposals, as it says there. But I would like to discuss if this scoring stuff makes sense to you guys, and what do you think about that?
I'm a bit hesitant about the scoring. I'm doing a lot of experiments now that have lots of scoring things, and I think it can be very subjective. And I guess I think a simpler concept, maybe like priority or just the order that something's presented. I'm just worried about scoring because you want it to have a very understandable meaning. and you're going to have these random, float values, I assume, for scoring that across maybe different containers, across different kind of contexts. How do we know that they mean the same thing? So I guess it might make sense if it's within the context of one artifact. But if that's the case, then, why would we could just use something that's akin to a priority, and it wouldn't need to be a field. It could just be represented in like the ordering or something. So I'm kind of, I need someone to convince me that that's a good idea, that that's something that I want to do.
But I think there are different aspects to it, right? I'm totally with you that in a generic whatever registry, having those kind of scoring is kind of like not really useful because we have so many permutations of systems and it's hard to come up with one score. But for like a site registry where you can run experiments with each of the images and you can create those kind of scoring for a specific use case, I think that would be cool. Like not for a global registry, but for a site-specific registry, not relying on the ordering, but maybe on a separate label or annotation. I think that would be cool, because you can maybe augment this as well, right? You have this upstream compatibilities, and then you just add your own score for different registries on a site, and you just merge them and provide those two systems to pick the right one.
Yeah, I guess my question is though, like, what are the algorithms that determine that scoring, and how do you reproduce them? How do you compare between images? How do you compare within and between images over time? I think it's a cool idea, but only in that all of that information is totally transparent, because if it's not, then all of a sudden you have these scores that are not comparable across time, not comparable between images. You don't understand how they're derived. You don't know if they're derived differently between things, but you're using them to say something meaningful. And I think that could be dangerous.
Yeah, you're right. I think we need to make sure that people understand what the message is and what they are used for. But I think for a site administrator, ordering the images basically in a certain point in time for a specific instance or for a specific set of instances, I think some kind of priority label, or maybe it's the order, I don't know. But the order is, I think, tricky. So I think having one label that you can choose and say, like, this is the priority. Maybe it's not compatibility score, maybe it's priority, but I think
I like priority. That is like 1, 2, 3, like, it's sort of assumed to be kind of arbitrary, in the sense, like, it's not, my concern is like a value between 0 and 1 or something like that was derived in some way that we are not privy to. Like, arguably the priority is the same, but at least the priority, it's more like a ranking, a ranking is more.
Wouldn't we need this? Sorry, and wouldn't we need this kind of anyways? Because if we have a very generic compatibility and a very specific one, we want the specific one to be matched first and then the generic one, right? So we need kind of a ranking between images anyways. And if we, or is it in general in a way implemented that if you have two compatibility lists for two different images, that you look for the most specific one first to match?
I actually just ran that in my experiments. I have a selection algorithm, and I just do it by the listing. So I have like a bunch of criteria for the first group. And if I don't get any matches, then I go to the second, which is like less ideal, but still okay. It's going to be like more expensive. But so we're talking about proposal H, right?
Yeah.
Right. And
Okay.
I think Joe's intention in here is not to compare this scoring against different images. All of this is happening around one image. So for example, if you have a list of 3 compatibilities and you have compatibility with score 100, 50, and 20, you first pick the compatibility with score 100. You check if it fails, like if it's valid with the node. If not, you go to another compatibility and check if this is still okay. If it's okay,
Yeah,
then
no, I think we understand that. So I
Okay.
would argue that you'd want this to be just the order that is in that particular list without the score. And the reason is that when you're parsing it, you just start at the first one. The first one's a match, you're done. You don't have to parse the entire list, get the scores, and then sort them. which seems like
Yeah.
an extra unnecessary step, but it gets at the same goal.
That makes sense.
But
yeah.
let's say we have two images with compatibility list. I mean, and just thinking out loud, wouldn't it be nice to have a priority and compare the same priorities of those two images first?
But
To
now
say,
you're
like,
talking about comparing them. We can't do that, Christian, unless we know that they were direct. Go ahead, Patrick.
okay.
Yeah, I was just thinking actually with the scoring, that I don't know, if you have like a map of something, the ordering might be a bit random. If something just actually then spits this one out as
Well, it's a list of maps.
yeah, well, I was just thinking that actually if you have some kind of label that sort of says that, hey, this is more important than the other one, try this one first, that sounds good. Of course you have to then parse everything and figure it out from top to bottom.
Just to make it very explicit, you mean, like over the attribute?
Yeah, no, it's called compatibility score, at least in this document here, but I mean some kind of ordering, so meaning that, okay, try this one would be the most optimal. Yeah, you could say that it's the ordering in where it goes, but
Yeah, don't we already do that for the manifest index, the list?
no idea.
Yeah, we are doing that, right, for the
Yeah, I
image
think if Brandon
selection.
was here, he would say yes.
We do right for the manifest list. You pick the first one that matches, and off you go.
But I'm wondering if we are not gonna limit ourselves because of keeping this as a list. I mean, I'm talking about this priority stuff that we rely on the order in the list of the priority, because I'm thinking about the use case. What if we have multiple elements in the list, but for example, you would like to introduce tags, and we have 5 elements in the list, and let's say 2 elements of the list have a specific tag, and you would like to get the compatibility only with a tag. So I'm thinking here again about tagging specific compatibilities with specific hardware. Like you can have multiple different compatibilities based on the specific hardware, right? Do you get my point? It's a similar idea as we had with this graph representation for the spec, but you would filter specific compatibilities over the tag. Not sure
Yeah, so I don't
if
think there's any reason you couldn't parse the whole list and apply filters and whatnot. I think it's just for the simplest. Oh, you're saying then you'd lose the order.
Yeah.
Well, you would
That's
enumerate and okay, yeah. No, I think we could come up with a compromise where like you are allowed to, if you want, to put a priority that is an integer value starting at 1 to n. But maybe it's not required.
Yeah, that makes sense. That by default behavior is that you have a list with priority, but if you want to do something else, you can specify attribute for that.
Actually, the ordering kind of thing already says that it's optional, so then it's basically, if there is no ordering specified at all, it means that of course any of these are good ones, and then you probably go in the order that they are in the list, or
I mean,
just
every programming
them.
language, though, every programming language has an ability to enumerate and include a counter with it. So I don't think there would be any issues or any case where you couldn't get the order of the item in the list as you're parsing it into something else.
But
Okay, so go ahead,
but
please.
still, like, say I have an application with GPU support, but it also runs without a GPU. And I have this one at the very top of my image index because I want it to be used when I have this GPU, but it will also run without the GPU. If I'm not using this priority, I will go through the list. I will match the compatibility that is generic for the CPU variant, and I won't look into other images deep down in the manifest index, in the image index. Isn't it And then maybe I'm missing something from the last couple of like the last two meetings, but wouldn't it be nice to go through the whole image index, collect all the matches, and then compare them against each other to find the best one? Or is it up to the tool, I suppose? Maybe that's... You know what I'm getting? Like if we have an image that is very specific, but can also run very generic with worse performance, and if it's at the top of the list, then it will just be picked all the time because it's specific and generic.
So, yeah, so I think I get where we are going. Yeah. It's something that I don't understand with this either, right? So the compatibility specs currently would be an extra JSON per digest. So if you have multiple, not digest.
No, I think I see what you're saying. There's actually now kind of two. Image selection is not just going down and looking at that in the way that it is now, looking at, for example, okay, the platform. There's almost like two steps. You're going through this list first as you find that image. So, okay, the first in the index, that's going to jump over to a compatibility spec. Once it jumps, though, there's another list that's going to go down. And it could be that the best image is actually the second one in that original list. But because you allow this to go down to the most generic vanilla that will work but isn't very good, you're going to choose that one in favor of the next one. So that would call for some ability. That would actually call for a need for a score, because what you'd ideally want to do is get the match. You want to get the score of the match that you just parsed through. That's like, okay, this is the best score that I got for this first entry in the index. And I guess this would also depend on the tool, but you could keep going and then be like, okay, is this second score better or worse? But then then it becomes more complicated, because right now you just stop when you get a match, right? But now when we get a match, the idea is like, oh, we'll just keep going because we have to check all the scores. And I don't think anyone's going to like that. But that's a good point, that we're going to like pre-optimize for something that isn't very optimal.
I mean, and it depends, of course, on, like, if you are controlling your own registry, you can create images with only very specific compatibility entries, and then you don't have this problem, right? But if the image is for a wider audience, you most likely will have a very specific compatibility definition, but also a very generic, as generic as you can get definition, to make sure that it's used by others, even if it's not super optimized, right? So I think that's, and having at least the option, like, it's optional. You can pick the first one, and depending on the compatibilities for the different images within the image index, then you will maybe not get the best performing image for your hardware.
Yeah, I guess so, to play devil's advocate, in the way that we do it now, if you're going down that list, you get the first match, that's the one you choose, right? And so arguably we'd already stopped there. And so the question is, given that we've chosen that first match, then let's now go down the compatibility list and like further optimize based on the compatibility. And so the assumption that you're making is that the last one that we put in that compatibility list is somehow a worse match than the second that we find in the index. And I don't know how to account for that.
I mean, like, let's say we have image 1 and image 2 within the image index, and the image 1 has a priority score of 10, which is the best, which doesn't match because it's specific and cannot be used by the current host we are on. And it has also a priority of 0, which is the worst, which is super generic and can be used. So you have like image 1, priority 0. You go down, and if you find a matching image with a higher priority that you already have, you can swap it and say like, okay, oh, that's better. It has 5. And then you go
And you
down
have to
the
make
list.
that noise.
Yeah, and you need this noise. I mean, we need to put it in as well. Like, there needs to be like, ooh, emoji. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, you are able, like, it's optional to go down the list to find the best priority, and if the priority is set. If it's not, then you just pick the first one.
So just to clarify one thing here, because just to say that container D maintainers, we didn't agree with container runtimes if they will rely on artifact for image selection. To solve image selection, basically we have two proposals, A and E, and we still have to discuss with, for example, container defaults if they would consider artifact for image selection in any way. So just to clarify that we are not discussing here about container runtimes right now, but if you are talking about your own tool, how you do image selection would be basically up to you. What you consider and what you don't.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah. Just to
But
clarify that.
I think we've sort of just tiptoed also into this discussion about compatibility versus like optimization, because Christian, you said specifically like it won't work. And so that hints at compatibility. So that could absolutely not be considered an option. So probably the tool, I guess minimally the tool would need to know, given this list of compatibility specs, is there one that just works? Because in the case that there's one that doesn't work, that's when you continue. And kind of what you're talking about is more on the optimization thing. Like we're going down and maybe the first two don't work. The third one works, but it's not very good. So that's where you'd need that score. Oh, this is hard. I guess the question is why is this represented as two separate images in the original manifest list as opposed to different compatibility groupings or something? Like why are they like, is there some way we can consolidate them into one?
I'd say no. Like for instance, GrowMax, if you compile it with GPU support, it will also run without GPU, right? So you can use it without a GPU. It will just work. And then maybe you want this to work as well and say like, okay, because if you only have this image, then you want it to run and not wait for something that is just compiled for CPU. So, but yeah, maybe it's a discussion of labels now. And at the end of the day, if we have a label that says OCI priority, it's up to the runtimes to implement it, the selection of it. Maybe we can defer it to the label discussion because it's just a label at the end, right? So.
Yeah, it could be that like a label past the threshold is like this is not great, continue looking or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe it's a label under the org supercontainers priority thing that we just use for HPC runtimes, and it's just there.
I mean, the priority makes sense, not only for HPC, I think so. We could come up with something generic, but we have to have a further discussion with container runtime maintainers about this image selection thing, how to proceed, what they agree with, and so on. We have Steven in here, but he left, so.
He left. Ouch. He probably was like, why are they talking about Colorado?
And maybe
Steven,
so
why
maybe we
did you
don't.
leave? Are you watching this? Why did you leave? No.
Or maybe it's late for him.
It's okay. Our feelings are not hurt. As I go off and cry after this meeting.
We are just waiting for some opinions from Steven and Phil on the proposal E. So yeah, let's see how this is gonna go.
And maybe
maybe we don't actually need a priority, but maybe just simply say whether this is like a perfect match or is a weak, so a strong match or weak match. That's really it. Or I think you just need a flag that says keep going after this one if it's or pick this one if it's matching.
Yeah, but if like you are talking about a bool, but if we don't use a bool but an integer, I think it's the same kind of.
But the difference is when we have this ordering, then you need to evaluate all of it. With this keep going flag here, you can shortcut the evaluation if if you find something that worked. I'm not sure if that is a super important optimization, but that was pointed out earlier.
Yeah, but I propose that we discuss this when we discuss what labels to be generic and what are specific, and then we can put it wherever. And then thinking about this more, like maybe is it something for the HPC container workshop at ISC to highlight this conflict, this dilemma, and have a slot about this to discuss with the container runtime, HPC container runtime maintainers?
Yeah, definitely. I
It
mean,
would
we
be
should
cool, right,
highlight all problems.
Yeah.
I mean, because we spoke in the past about exposing this to wide communities. That time I was against, and still I'm against. But if we have conferences like that, where you have like special interest groups for that, I would say just go for it and say, because I just want to avoid bringing attention of so many users, because it's really hard to get their attention again, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I will make maybe in the image compatibility working group one segment within the workshop where we can highlight problems that we pick our brains about and make it a discussion.
Sounds good. And Vanessa, you're also going to the conference?
Remotely, I suppose.
Not in person. I do not want COVID, but if it's virtual, I could participate in some means. But we did a survey too, so we could. Yeah, I'll have to talk to you, Christian, about if that's possible, desired, whatever. I could definitely present something.
Yes and no.
Okay, good. I'm glad we got that cleared up.
No, it's fine. We unlike the SC event, we are able or allowed to just have a Zoom call, standing Zoom call for. I mean, I would call you panelists anyways, but for panelists and participants, not just for like viewers, and then that's fine.
Would that be okay if we expose this meeting to the whole group, or do you want to keep it more HPC centric?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh gosh, I think everyone should be invited. I think one of the biggest issues we have is that like we have like HPC conferences and we have cloud conferences and like the people don't talk to each other, and I think we should be going to each other's conferences. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, the only caveat is I think if we open it too much, if there are like people who are just listening in and not participating in like a speaker role, basically, then we might trip over some wire that the SC or ISC community, like the workshop organizers, say like, okay, he's inviting like 100 people to a Zoom call just to listening in. So it needs to be like a panelist with an expertise.
So
no, I disagree. I think the more audience that we have, how could they have an issue with that? More people are interested to attend the conference. Oh, what a terrible thing. I mean, I think we should at least try. I think to be less inclusive because we're worried about stepping on some random administrator toes is not something I want to do.
Yeah, but let's talk about this later. But if they, and I'm not sure they do have, I think they don't have an online attendance price tag. It's just, do they? No, they don't have an online one. So I think that's in our favor, right? Because if you don't go, you're not going to pay money. So yeah, I mean, it's what I'm saying is we don't use X for it to announce it, and LinkedIn, it's just a private, okay, here's a secret invite that you can join.
What I meant is at least that we have people from the group, this group, on the meeting as
this
well.
group is fine. This group is fine.
Okay, anything else to discuss?
I think we should decide. So we like the idea of kind of combining those. Does someone want to take a shot at that?
The next 2 weeks I'm off because my vacation started, so I won't be able. But by that you mean to create a new proposal out of that, or what do you mean exactly?
Yeah, wasn't your proposal to create a kind of combined more
Uh,
finalized proposal?
Yes, but I will still keep the discussion open. Let's just give some people some thoughts on that. Maybe a week.
Okay,
or
so
two.
no homework for this week.
No, just go through the homework is go through proposal A, proposal E, F, and H again, and express your opinions. If you have something going on in your head, it's a good time to just express that, because I'm feeling we are reaching kind of critical state right now, that we are at the final design and hearing opinions there and there. So I would not create yet a final proposal, but let people think and process all of this. So yeah,
Marcin, are
basically
you
that.
feeling better now? Because I remember in the beginning you were like that you were frustrated that we weren't making a lot of progress.
Yes, I'm feeling much better.
Okay, that's great.
And your vacation is on the Philippines.
Yes, it's hot as hell.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a vacation.
Problems.
Vacation.
Cool. Alrighty
Alrighty,
then.
well, thanks folks. Good conversation. Have a great rest of your Monday. Stay with power. Electricity is.
Okay,
Yeah.
folks,
All right.
thanks, and talk to you
Okay.
soon. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.